Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg on this fine Saturday afternoon. My name is Lyss. As always, I am one of your hosts. Brady is not here today because he abandoned me to go hang out at the Kenny and Rennie live show, which sounds like a ton of fun. And here I am by my lonesome covering what was a pretty stinky one. Thank you so much everyone for being here live in the chat, and if you're listening back after the fact, thank you so much for subscribing and checking out SGPN. Before we get started on this game here, we're going to share some quick words from our sponsors, and then we'll get into it. If you're live in the chat right now, please feel free to contribute your thoughts. I know you have a lot of them.
It's March Mania at Sports Interaction. NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, and so much more. It's bananas. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness, exclusive games with insane odds that you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario using the QR code that you see at the bottom of my screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SGPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly.
So obviously we have a lot of thoughts going into this game here that we want to talk about, but first and foremost, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Winnipeg Jets have scored a power play goal. So that is a very thrilling storyline to come from this game. Obviously, there's not a lot of great that went on, not a lot of stuff that we are super thrilled to be talking about right now. But the fact that there is a power play goal to talk about is huge because we haven't had that in a very long time. Pierre-Luc scores the first goal of the game, the only goal of the game for the Winnipeg Jets on the power play, and breaks the streak. That was their 24th power play attempt that they were going on that hadn't scored. And even before that, it's not like it was doing fantastic either. So the fact that they were able to break that streak was really exciting, obviously, but that's about all the good there is to come from this game. So I want to talk a little bit about how things started off first. So obviously, people talk a little bit about Connor Hellebuyck, and, letting in the first goal of the game consistently has been frustrating for the Jets. And that first particular goal, Connor Hellebuyck, I don't think that was his fault by any means. And, even if it was, say he lets in a really, really bad goal, you can't expect to have a hot start to a game when you get outshot 11-0 right from the first whistle. And that's an issue that I've been struggling a lot with this Winnipeg Jets team on, is because obviously we know that talent is not an issue here. They have a decently constructed roster. They have some really good pieces that a lot of teams would be lucky to have. And yet it's all about the intrinsic motivation and their ability to generate and create and get excited and actually do things, And when that's been a huge struggle for your team for quite some time, obviously pucks aren't going their way. There's some poor shooting percentages. There are some guys that are just feeling some frustrations. You have to be better than that to start the game, because if you go down, 11-0 on shots right off at the beginning, it's showing that, the likelihood of you scoring the first goal dwindles and dwindles and gets smaller and smaller every shot that you give up and every offensive zone pressuring shift that the LA Kings have in that particular game. You need to not, be pushed down further than you already are. You're already down so low with so many of these different areas, and you're already struggling so much in so many things. So you're not doing yourself any favors by having to not just, at the best of times be chasing some energy and chasing momentum, but be doing that when down 1-0 early on in the game. And that's something that's been been a struggle for the Winnipeg Jets for the last little while. And, obviously right now it's so important that they win hockey games. And when you're already struggling for motivation, chasing a game is the last thing that you want to do when you desperately need these wins. So the Winnipeg Jets had to be chasing this game right from the beginning. Chasing makes it sound like there was a little bit more energy and excitement than there actually was. So maybe that's the wrong word to use because they weren't working too hard for it. But when you're down 1-0 right at the beginning, it makes it really difficult. So that's something that I really struggle with this team is obviously, you don't need to be harder on yourselves than you already are, because obviously they're their own worst enemies in so many of these situations. Power play. It's not like they're playing a really fantastic penalty kill every single night. Sure, they've played against a couple of good penalty killing teams, but it's all on them. It's all on them. So don't do more to dig your hole deeper than you already have. So that's my frustration with that start of the game. So obviously there's that irritation right off the bat with all these players, and they're getting frustrated, but these players aren't really capitalizing on their frustrations the way that you sometimes see from teams when they have these bounce back games or these bounce back shifts and things like that when they've been frustrated. One player that I think has been pretty frustrated particularly in the post-game pressers and whatnot over the last little bit, is Pierre-Luc Dubois. And that's a player who seems to play pretty well when he's frustrated, and it seems to be working out okay in his favor in a couple of different reasons. But beyond him, and, I thought Niederreiter looked okay. Thought Kyle Connor didn't look his worst. I struggled with the top 6 tonight, and I think those are the players that need to, be doing more for themselves, and they need to be doing more for the team in general to generate that momentum and generate that offense. And I feel like I'm going to keep using that word generate, but it is the issue here because the defense, I don't mind the way that they're playing. I actually think that the defensive positioning has been pretty good, and they've actually been doing not a terrible job of getting pucks out and doing some retrieval. And, obviously on that, I want to say the third goal tonight, there was a Connor Hellebuyck screen, and that makes it difficult. He couldn't see that puck. He didn't have eyes on it, and that goes in. And obviously the second goal, the power play goal that was given up by the Jets, you want to have better control over your own crease than that with your defenders in the penalty kill. Little things like that are obviously frustrations, and there are situations too where there were frustrations that didn't necessarily lead to a goal. All that's to say, the defense isn't the issue here. It's all about the actual generation from that top 6 and from the players who have the offensive abilities. But Dave Smith says, is there another former Moose alum they can hire in the offseason to fix the power play? Because, this penalty kill and the defensive structure in general has looked much, much better this year. And that's one thing that even though this team is so down right now and in such a slump, the penalty killing has been pretty consistent. Obviously, tonight's goal that was given up isn't exactly always what you want. But hey, it happens to the best of us, and that penalty kill is not a particular area of concern for me at this time. So looking at, those forwards and what they're able to create and what they aren't creating, I'm really, really struggling to see how they're confident running these similar lines when there's just absolutely nothing being generated. No offense as far as like energy or actual shots going. Obviously tonight there were a ton of missed shots, which is something that I think they showed the ticker a couple times in the broadcast, and I was like, you're joking. Like they had, I want to say close to 20 missed shots over the course of that game. So, stuff like that shows up decently for possession numbers and stuff like that. But I found that tonight when they were struggling, it was when they weren't collapsing the net properly or cycling the puck down low. So at the end of the first period, like obviously the beginning of that first period was really, really frustrating in a lot of different ways. But at the end, in the intermission, like, okay, they're picking it up, they're trending in the right direction, all that good stuff. And a lot of that came from Josh Morrissey on his last shift of that period. I think he had 3 or 4 shots on net just in that same shift from the top left, maybe 3 or 4 strides in from the blue line. Low shots at Korpisalo's pads, and then I believe it was the third line that was on with him at the time, and they were just creating that chaos in front, and that's where the momentum and the energy came from, was utilizing the top heavy shots, because we know that their defensemen are going to be shooting if we know anything about this team, and then shooting them, not, being Nate Schmidt and going 3 feet wide into the glass, and then having a bouncy puck to try and retrieve like a golf ball, but a low shot on net to hit those pads, create some form of rebound, create some chaos if nothing else is working. I think this Winnipeg Jets team has relied a little bit too much on their actual talent and their ability. It's not that they've always been the best rush team or anything like that, but, you could get a puck to Kyle Connor in almost any situation, and if he shot it, it was going in the net, things like that. They've been relying on that type of stuff a little bit too much, and what I think they need to do is just kind of go back to the basics on, what I was saying about that Josh Morrissey thing there, where, if you have someone like Kyle Connor or Mark Scheifele, who's an elite shooter from the flank or an elite shooter on quick one-timers, all that good stuff, good, that's fine. You can continue to use that to your advantage. But it just might look a little bit different in a different situation, where maybe now Kyle Connor's goal is like the one that got the monkey off his back last game, where it's a rebound off of a rush shot, whatever, and it's not the typical teed up pass that he's used to, but it's a loose puck in an uncontrolled area that he's able to capitalize on because he has such great shooting talent. So I think that they need to be focusing a little bit more on that type of thing, because it just seems like nothing else is working right now. And you have guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, obviously, tonight, he had a shooting goal, which, we don't see too many of those from him on the power play, but we know how we have players that can shoot. So just getting more opportune pucks in front of the net is going to be extremely important for this team going forward. But that's all to say, Baby Yoda in the chat is saying this team sucks. They are not making the playoffs. Calgary's going to pass them. So that's always the elephant in the room. We can come on here and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the reality is, at this point in the season, you need wins. You need 2 points in that win column, and you need to be able to secure those in order to claim your berth in the postseason. And especially this afternoon, it was a lot of fun, getting notifications from all the different games going on. All four, I guess, including the Jets, of the wild card battling teams right now were playing today. So especially in those situations, obviously games in hand, all that good stuff, and, different times of day, different days of games and all that good stuff. But seeing when everyone's playing at the same time, you need those wins. You need those wins. The LA Kings are a strong team, and I want to talk a little bit more about them as well. But my frustration is, you can look at the good. Yeah, it's great that they got a power play goal. And yeah, it's great that they did a couple of these small things. And yeah, it's great that Josh Morrissey was able to create a couple of extra chances because of some proper shooting. Cool. Still lost. And that's what matters right now. Obviously, you want them to tread in the right direction and make progress in a lot of different areas. But if you can't win a hockey game, you can't claim a wild card spot. So I believe I'll have to go take a look at the out-of-town scoreboard right now, because last I checked, Calgary is up 5-3 on San Jose, and that game is done 5-3 final, so Calgary gets 2 points this afternoon. Seattle gets 2 points this afternoon as well, so a Nashville loss is good for the Jets. Seattle, it's the kind of thing where obviously you want everyone to lose if you can, because when you're in that wildcard spot, you'd prefer to take wildcard one and jump on the worst of the top division winners and whatnot. But if Seattle takes it and runs, I don't know how that sounds grammatically. It is what it is, but it's more Calgary and Nashville, at least personally, that I'm worried about. So a Nashville loss is great today, but Calgary getting 2 points is not ideal either. So this Winnipeg Jets team continues to beat themselves down and continues to suck. And other teams are getting out those wins that they need to win. Obviously, Calgary playing San Jose today is a little bit, it is what it is, but the Winnipeg Jets have San Jose on Tuesday, and, if you play the same way you played against Arizona or even Anaheim, they played okay, but they played well. But if San Jose shows up, and if there's a particular reason for San Jose to show up, if you lose that game, it doesn't matter if you played better, if you did all this, the wins are not on the scoreboard, and you don't get the points you need to be in the wildcard spot. So I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but it's getting to that point where it's getting extremely urgent. And just the uninspired hockey that I watched for 2.5 hours this afternoon doesn't make me think that they're in as urgent of a place as they actually are. So Dave Smith says that looks like in the Jets media, they're a little bit more interested in Morrissey stitches than explaining why they stink. So obviously, yeah, definitely would like to hear some harder hitting questions about the play of the team and the overall uninspired hockey that we all watched today, because I don't think anyone, watched that and thought that was a fantastic effort across the board from, especially the key players. But contrary to what Dave Smith said, I also want to talk about Josh Morrissey stitches, because let's talk about this a little bit. So for those of you who are in the chat, thank you so much for being here as always. And if you are new here, make sure you hit subscribe. And if you're just in the chat in general, make sure you like. I want to know if you guys think that Blake Lizotte is going to get suspended. And if so, what do you think he's going to get? So obviously today, one of the more undisciplined and bizarre reactions I've seen in quite some time was Blake Lizotte's cross-check to Josh Morrissey's face. It looked like those players were ready to get into a little bit of a tussle. There were some heated emotions about not going out there, but, 2.5 feet in front of the ref, 2 hands on the stick, lifted, cross-checked right in the chin. Insane. I don't know. Blake Lizotte, I think, is a decent hockey player, and he doesn't strike me as the type of player that would do that sort of stuff on the reg. But what an absurd play for a player to make, especially in a game when for the LA Kings, the Pacific Division is not super interesting to me because I hate the Edmonton Oilers and I'm not super interested in them. But I know that LA has a chance of winning the division, or even, obviously when you're in the top 3 in your particular division, you can be looking for the title, or you can be looking for home ice advantage within the 2-3 spot there or whatever. LA still has stuff to play for. They do. And that just seems like a strange play to make at this time of the year. Blake Lizotte could genuinely get like a 3 or 4 game suspension for that. That was a super undisciplined play. I'm glad Josh Morrissey's okay, but that took me by surprise. So yeah, for those of you who are listening live, I'd love to know what you think he's going to get. Craig Button was talking in the intermission on the TSN broadcast, and he wasn't impressed either. And he made it sound like Lizotte was going to get like 10 games or something like that. He was like, you're not getting 1 or 2 for that. He'll probably get 1 or 2 for that, but I could see it going as high as something like 4 games, because that was a crazy play. Like, sometimes when it comes to like those really dangerous hits or really dangerous like injury resulting plays, it's always a little bit more subjective, because it's like, did he mean to do this, or is this a clean hit that just had a worse injury, and is this? Like, there's so many things, but this wasn't even a hockey play. This was just Blake Lizotte being a goon. Like, that was so insane. So I'm really interested to see what comes of that. Obviously, with the match penalty, we know that that's going to be going under review from the NHL, so we'll see if DOPS comes up with anything interesting. If it's $5,000 league max, if we see that tweet come out from NHL Player Safety, that'll be interesting. But I don't know. It'll be definitely very interesting to see what comes of that, and I have a feeling it'll be something around a 3-game suspension. But I've been very wrong on Department of Player Safety issued suspensions before, so we will have to see. So I want to read a couple more comments here in the chat, where Jake says that Mark Scheifele is 8 games without a goal, and Craig Button called the Jets a perimeter team that refuses to get dirty. So those are 2 good, interesting points that I do want to talk about a little bit as well. Mark Scheifele, to me, is the player that, and I don't want to, absolve Kyle Connor of all responsibility now that he's got his goal last game and all that good stuff, but when I talk about uninspired hockey and, not playing with urgency, Mark Scheifele is kind of the player that's the one that I'm picturing when I'm making comments like that, right? Like, he is a player that needs inspiration and motivation more than anyone else. But my issue with him is that he is the type of player, and the way he plays is that he should be able to create that for himself. Kyle Connor I have a little bit more patience for, because he is my one-trick pony king. Won't win a board battle to save his life. Won't break through the zone with a ton of speed and generate anything. He might break through the zone with speed, but it's going to end up being a dump or like a cute little pivot and then a toss down the boards and all that good stuff. But Mark Scheifele has the ability to create the momentum that the Jets are lacking, and he's just not doing it. Again, 8 games without a goal, I could manage if he was doing other stuff. But he's not doing other stuff. It just seems like he's doing a whole lot of nothing out there. And that is the last thing you need from your top line center. So Mark Scheifele, to me, is the kind of player that has, it's in his hands. We know that Mark Scheifele, people talk about his defensive woes and all that good stuff, and so rightfully so, but he's been like a point per game, player for pretty much his entire career. It's the kind of thing where he can almost score at will in a lot of situations, and even though he's so egregious defensively, he's pretty much over the course of his entire career created more than he's given up, not just on the score sheet, but just in the general, possession. He outpossesses his other teams, and things like that. So we know that the player has the ability to have a really net positive impact on this team, and I'm feeling none of that right now. It just feels like such a minuscule effort, and I'm struggling with it. And I haven't listened to enough post-game coverage from this team, often because I don't find the answers that the players give super insightful, if I'm being completely honest with you. Color me shocked, an NHL player gives an uninspiring answer. That's pretty regular, but all that's to say, is he as frustrated as he should be? I know at the end of the game we saw a slam of the board, the slam of the stick, all that stuff, because he went shotless in this game, is my understanding, which is also hilarious for me. No shots, no generation of anything. Like, Jeepers Creepers, what did you even do tonight, my girl? But I think, obviously, there are woes and players don't score for a while, especially if they're scoring forwards and stuff like that, but if I'm him, he should be more frustrated than he is, because he has the power to make it better. And, Brady posts that Mark Scheifele got him 0.2 points in his fantasy league today. Like, again, it's not like he's playing some crazy defensive hockey. It's not like he's, fighting guys and in the box for the entirety of the game, so can't create much. Like, he's just doing a whole ton of nothing. So I think it's important that Jake brings that up, because Mark Scheifele needs to get his act together, because I think that if he as an individual, and not that you always want to put all of the weight on one player, but if he can start doing a little bit more for this team as a whole, I think a lot of other players will be better for it. I think Nikolai Ehlers will be better for it. I think Nino Niederreiter will start playing a little bit more. I thought he was fine today, but, the first couple of games that he had in Winnipeg I thought were really strong, and I think Nino Niederreiter will do better. Blake Wheeler just naturally does better when Mark Scheifele's doing better. That's one player that I feel as though I've been too mean to, so I don't want to say much more, but holy cow, is that guy struggling out there as well. Oh, that first Winnipeg Jets power play, do you guys remember that? The first unit comes out useless, absolutely garbage for the entirety of that time. And then the second unit comes out and Ehlers breaks into the zone 2 or 3 times, and all 3 times Wheeler just fumbles the puck and LA clears it out and nothing comes of it. That was the most frustrating power play attempt. At the end, they finally pulled their act together a little bit, and they banged in a couple shots, in the final 10-15 seconds of that power play, but holy cow, that was the weakest power play I think I've seen from the Winnipeg Jets in that stretch. It was horrible. It was atrocious. So I want to look at a couple more things in the chat here. You're going to sip some water. I've been yelling about this team for quite some time now, and see what everyone else's thoughts are. Yeah, so Dave says that 55 is starting to look a lot more like the 2020, 2021, and last year versions of him that we saw, and I fully agree. Mark Scheifele is so... December of the 2018-2019 season, something weird happened to that man, and he hasn't been the same since. And then I've been saying that for years, and then at the beginning of the season, I was like, all right, maybe it's time to walk back on my words, but he's starting to look like that again, just absurd. And even in that time, though, at least he was scoring goals, It's the kind of thing where it's like, if you're someone who's a little bit of a stats head like me and likes to look at a couple of the other metrics, underlying metrics, if you will, all those different kinds of things, he has his moments of being a frustrating player, but, I am so much an offense person. It's like, if you can score goals, I can forgive a lot of stuff. And if you can generate other people scoring goals and all that good stuff, I feel better about it. I feel okay about you sucking in other areas. But he's not even doing that right now. And this is a time when, the luck will come if you're generating so much. But it's like, the luck needs to come now, because this Winnipeg Jets team has never needed wins more than they do right now. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. The only thing that David made a comment is that he realized his agent got him a terrible contract. I don't know if he's talking about Mark Scheifele or Blake Wheeler, but Mark Scheifele is a player that's been underpaid for his entire career with the Jets, and I keep worrying that if he plays really well over the course of the next year, that his next contract is going to be crazy big. It's going to be an $8.25 Blake Wheeler contract, and I don't want Mark Scheifele under that contract. So maybe for other reasons, you can always look for a silver lining in things. Maybe it's okay that Mark Scheifele's not at his best right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the next little bit that the Winnipeg Jets have. So tonight, what I also didn't like, surprise, I didn't like something that happened, was I thought that Anaheim, jeez. You know what, we're going to wrap up pretty soon because I'm just saying things. But I thought the LA Kings are a pretty strong forechecking team, and I thought that the Winnipeg Jets struggled more against that than I've seen in quite some time. I thought that there were times when you thought they should have pretty controlled possession in their own zone from a dump in or whatever, or something like that, and they just weren't able to exit properly, and that was alarming to me. And I think, again, it's the kind of thing that you see from better hockey teams. The LA Kings are a good team, which, at the same time, as they are a good team, I also find them to be a pretty uninteresting team. I don't know if there are any teams that have less exciting superstars right now. Like, I always make jokes with the Minnesota Wild and how boring they were, but then they got Kaprizov, so they had the reason to, you know, make highlight reels occasionally and stuff like that. But, like, I'm trying to think of all the teams that are in playoff spots right now. I think the LA Kings are the team that I'd be the least interested in watching. Like, they just kind of seem like a whole lot of good players, but they don't have anything that's, like, overwhelmingly great to me. And even like someone like Anze Kopitar is like good at hockey, and he's great at hockey, but his whole thing is that he's good at everything. It's not like he has that one crazy trick or that one crazy awesome thing. So it's like the highlight reel is a little bit different from a team like the LA Kings. But all that's to say is I think they play really good 200-foot hockey from what I experienced tonight. And again, it's the same thing where sometimes Brady and I will sit down at the beginning of these shows and we're like, okay, disclaimer, this is the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is the Arizona Coyotes. I feel like you could say that if you're doing a game over LA or something and you're like, okay, this looks like a good game, but again, this is the Winnipeg Jets, who are a terrible hockey team. And so, but I did think that they were a stronger forechecking team tonight than I was expecting, and the Winnipeg Jets didn't seem to respond to that super well from what I observed. So that's always what you don't want. You want teams to play up to the levels of their stronger teams. We know that, just by the nature of how teams are constructed, the sine curve path that they should be following of being good and being bad at different times, that some teams are just naturally and more inherently better than others. But oftentimes those poor teams are able to, for a game or two, play up to the level of their competition. And alternatively, you can also play down to the level of your competition. And I just wish the Winnipeg Jets would play up to the level, because we know they have the ability to, even if it's just for a couple games at a time, because they certainly do tend to play down to the level of their opponents if they're playing weaker teams. But they never just have the extra oomph and urgency to play up to the level of stronger opponents. So I thought that tonight, a lot of the areas of the LA Kings were strong. The Winnipeg Jets weren't strong enough. So I feel like that kind of, wraps up the general gist of what I wanted to say about, that. Brady's in the chat right now. I see he says, like the stream. I agree. If you're here, please do so. And Brady, if you are still currently in the chat, let us know how the Kenny and Rennie post game is going. That sounds like a ton of fun. For those of you who are maybe new here, aren't super common Winnipeg Jets fans, maybe you're an LA Kings fan, or maybe you're just here checking it out because this link came up on your feed. We're in pretty good hands here in Winnipeg when it comes to post-game coverage. Like, obviously, you can go watch the actual Winnipeg Jets stuff and hear from the players, hear from the coaches, and all that good stuff. And then also, right after Game Over Winnipeg is done, because you usually go live 5 to 10 minutes after the game is over, you also can go watch Kenny and Rennie. They usually start, I want to say, an hour and a half or something like that after the game is over. So usually our show will be over by that time and you'll get a different perspective from them, and they're fantastic. So make sure you go check that out afterwards as well. They give a little bit of a different perspective than we do here. And there's a lot you can learn from those guys. So they'll be talking a lot about what they saw tonight. Maybe share some insights on what this Winnipeg Jets team needs to work on. I think we all know what they need to work on, and we've been all saying it for quite some time. And obviously the Winnipeg Jets don't need me in my basement telling them what they're frustrated about and what they need to work on. They know. It's just a matter of actually, using that internal motivation to actually get there and do it, because I think that's what they need. So that kind of wraps up the general gist of what we wanted to talk about today. Brady is going to be back with you on Tuesday. So this Jets team now has 2 days of rest, which is really fantastic. And today being an afternoon game means they even get the extra half day. And Tuesday's a really late game. So they're in good shape to get some rest and hopefully have some really intense practices and work on everything. Work on that first unit being able to break in and get controlled possession on the power play, please, for the love of God. And then also work on crashing the net a little bit better in a more effective way and utilizing those shot-heavy defensemen that we know they want to utilize. So I think that there's there can be some optimism looking at Tuesday with giving these guys some time to rest and hopefully watching some other teams in that wild card race crash and burn a little bit. That would be fantastic as well. But it's all in the Jets. Doesn't matter if other teams are losing if they can't win. So hopefully Rick Bowness talks to his boys and then they get their act together. But either way, Brady and Connor will be back with you on Tuesday to discuss that. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. And we will see you over the course of the next 8 games and possibly into the postseason, depending on what this team does. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.